Hello, Train Valley community. This is Pluto, your fellow resident community member and sometime map maker. I put together this little guide for map making in Train Valley 2 in the hopes that I will inspire new and budding map makers in the Train Valley community to create and publish their own maps. I'm sure there are many of you out there who have great ideas for maps but might not be sure where to start, or might possibly be intimidated by the level editor within the Train Valley 2 game. Not to worry, the Train Valley 2 developers have put together a mighty fine editor with powerful features and a large expanse of 3D models and functionality that can get you started on any map you might want to create. It does, of course, have a few quirks, and the interface is not always intuitive. In this guide, I'd like to do a walkthrough of creating and publishing a map, which will hopefully take some of the mystery out of the process and make it easier for you to publish your own maps. As a Train Valley 2 workshop on Steam has 3,000 maps as of 2026, and we'd love for everyone to keep publishing maps and improving on their skills so that our lovely community will thrive for another 100 years. Without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing to do, obviously, is to open up the Train Valley 2 game and go to the workshop. That's this menu down here on the bottom right. When you open up that, you can see all the maps that are available in the Train Valley 2 workshop. You can sort by popularity, recently posted. You're probably familiar with this, but the level editor itself is at the top left. Just click on this button, and voila! Here we are in the level editor for Train Valley 2. In the main screen, you can see there's already a map here, although there's nothing actually in it. It's just a clean blank landscape with this pale green terrain. You can zoom in and out with your mouse. You can move back and forth by right-clicking, just like in the game. You can also see these blue outlined shapes. The light blue outlined shape will display what the monitor shows to the player. This is for regular monitors, while the dark blue larger one is for folks who have larger monitors. In general, I would suggest trying to keep your maps inside the smaller blue rectangle so that the most number of players can play your map easily. If you put things on your map that go outside the rectangles, players will have to switch to windowed mode or zoom in and out trying to click on things that are at the very edge of the map. This can be very annoying. I will show you what to look for to avoid this as we go through this tutorial. On the left is where you have all your options. You can see any maps that you currently are working on here. In this menu, some of these are just little things I'm playing with, so you can ignore all that. I will click on one here just to show you an example. It opens up your map where you can edit it and change things. If you need to get back to a different map, just click on Open and select it. When you're starting a new map, just click on the New button. This will open up an editor that will let you pick a name for your map. Just type in something. For this, I like to version them. So I save different versions as I progress, and that helps me in case something goes wrong with the computer, or if I start going in a direction I don't like with the design and want to go back to a previous version of the map. Click Save here, and your map will now be listed on the left as one of the maps available for you to edit. Once I've created the map and given it a new name, the next thing I like to do is size the map. There's a button up here called Resize, and it has a little switch that you can toggle between 60 and 90 tiles as the length of your map. It starts somewhere in the middle. Sometimes I like to bump it up a little bit for my maps. The offsets are a little more advanced, so you can ignore that for now. Click on Resize, and it will resize your map. So now there's the designated number of tiles inside the blue regions. The main thing to remember about resizing is that if you make the map bigger, it just shrinks everything down so that it still fits inside the viewing area. So if you want to make your map look like it's up close and personal, you could make the size really small, and it would expand to fill the viewing area. Also, don't worry if you start making your map and as you add objects and design, you decide you need to make it a little bigger or maybe a little smaller. You can always resize it later on. Okay, now we get to the real meat and potatoes of the level editor. Here on the left, there's a couple of icons, and we'll get to these each in turn, but the first and most important one is the one that looks like a little house. This icon allows you to select objects for your map. When you click on that, it opens up a menu of all the 3D models that you can add to your map. They are grouped by categories, as you can see these names here. If you click on a category, it expands and shows you all the different objects of that category type that can be put on your map. If you learn nothing else in this entire tutorial, the thing to remember is there are only 3 categories that are essential to making a map. These are the top 3 categories. You can see them here: productions, stations, and cities. This was something that I didn't quite understand when I started making maps, but it's very important when how you design your level. Basically, here's how it works. If you want to have any kind of map that actually does something, you'll need to have one or more quests. These quests will always be determined by a city. Let's look at an example. In the city section, we'll just click on the first city. Then once we've clicked on it, we can put it on the map by clicking somewhere in the map. You can zoom in to see it, and there is your city. You'll notice that a little property dialog has opened up on the left, showing properties you can set for your city. This section at the top shows quests number 1, number 2, and number 3. These always display airplanes as the default, but not a lot of maps actually use airplanes. It's just listed first because it starts with the letter A and is the first alphabetically in all the different things that you can add as a quest. Let's just pick books as an example and pick a number for the quest, maybe 5 books, and hit enter. There, you've created your first city with a quest. You can see it on the map. You can always go back to it and click it. If you click somewhere else on the map, the properties go away, but if you click it again, you can edit it. So for example, if you wanted to change it to 6 books, you just need to have it selected when you do that. Notice that every object that you put on the map will have a little icon when you click on it. It's this little circle and an upward arrow. If you hover over the circle until the shaded area appears, you can drag it around the map along the axes. The little outline of the circle is yellow, but when you hover over it, it turns this blue-green color, and if you left click and slide to the left or right around the circle, it rotates the object so you can put it in a position that you want. This up arrow moves it up and down, which for cities is probably not useful. So if you want to return to the position that it was in before, just click this undo button. It'll take you back. Now you have a quest, but that's not enough. You can't actually deliver any quest without having a station to deliver to. That is what the station section's for. Deselect on the city and select stations. This lists all the different stations that are in the game. This section has become a little messy as it seems to contain things that I would not call cities, but the developers just keep adding things as they get the new DLCs, so I'm not sure what they use to determine what counts as a station. For making your maps, you'll just have to remember which are the actual stations. I'll show you that right now. Any of these things at the top, called city stations, and anything towards the bottom that are called depots, will count as stations for our purposes. Luckily, they're all alphabetized kind of close to each other, so they're not that hard to find. We just picked one at random and put it next to our city. So now that when we deliver to that station, it will count as a delivery for this quest. When you drop the station down, the editing menu pops up for the station. Notice that it's slightly different than the properties for cities. For stations, you have the ability to create workers. So you can pick how many workers are available for the whole station, how long they take to produce, and how many you start with when the map begins. Change some of these settings right now, but for this example, we're not actually going to need any workers. The third thing we'll need for our map is something from productions that will produce our books for us to fulfill the quest. If you click on productions, you can see all the factories that are listed to make products. Unfortunately, the names of the production factories are almost never the same as the names of the products they produce, so it can be hard to find what you're looking for. I'll give you a few tips for that in a minute. For now, I know the factory that creates books is called the printing agency, so I'll go down to printing agency and select it. Once I've selected it, I can add it to my map, like so. Properties box is opened up on the top left again. You'll notice that for most factories, the properties are identical to station properties. In this case, it won't be workers, it'll be whatever products, like books, that it produces, what the size of the store is, how long it takes them to make, and how many they have to start with. As you change the settings and hit enter, it shows up on the map. So now we've got our map, and we've got a quest designated by a city with a station where we can deliver the quest. And we've got a production factory that can produce the items needed for the quest. This is a working level. We could run it right now. But first, we should go to Level Options menu. This is designated by the little wrench shape. I think a few of the beginning map makers forget about this section, because this is where you set how many trains you have, what kinds of trains, and where you set the 5-star level goals. Let's first look at the top where it says Funds. This is the starting funds for the level. We can bump it up a bit so they can have some money to play with. 50,000, hit enter. Then we have the initial train count. We can bump that up to 3. Maximum train count, make it 8. Train epoch. Now, epoch is just a fancy term for the type of train and how many cars it has. You just add 1 to the epoch to get the number of cars, so epoch 1 trains have 2 cars, epoch 2 trains have 3 cars, and so on. For this level, we'll start out with maybe 5 train cars, which is epoch 4, and we'll allow them to bump it up to 6, which is epoch 5. A little confusing, but once you get the hang of it. The next section is for the 5-star goals. The first 3 times are for the 3 stars that you get for completing the map within a certain time limit. The next 2 options are for the final 2 stars. You'll see little asterisks next to the times that indicate how many stars you get for each time. So the first time will be the fastest and gives you 3 stars. These times are listed in seconds, so 180 seconds would be 3 minutes. This is almost always too fast, so we should set it to something bigger. I tend to start with 600, which is 10 minutes, just as I'm playing with the level, and I can adjust it later. We can add 5 minutes for each one, so that as they get 5 minutes slower, they lose a star. The other 2-star goals are always set to blow up trains, which is almost never what you want, so we can change it to something else that seems more appropriate, say delivering to the correct stations and not crashing trains. The names of these goals are not always intuitive. A lot of them are, but for the ones that aren't, you'll have to experiment and see what they say when you run the game to find out exactly what they do. Now that our simple example map is ready to go, all we have to do is go to the top right corner and click Run. You can see that the map shows up just like you're playing the game. You can actually complete the whole level from this screen. If you forgot something and want to go back to the editor, just click Escape. It will take you back. Make sure not to hit Escape accidentally if you're testing one of your longer levels, because it will erase everything and you'll have to start all over by clicking Run. We can see that we have our city station and production, and the 5-star goals are over here. So the first one is 10 minutes, second one 15, third one 20, plus the no crashes and delivered to right station. On the bottom left, there's our trains that we picked and the ability to upgrade to 6, but not to 7. And we've got our productions ready to go, so all we need to do is build a track and deliver our 6 books. Ta-da! We've done our first level. Congratulations! Once you've completed the victory screen, you can either replay it by clicking on this little loopy arrow, or you could just click the checkbox to take you back to the editor again. So remember, to summarize, all you need for any level is a city with a quest, a station to receive the quest, and some sort of production to make the products that you deliver. Now, some of you who like the passenger flow levels, also known as the commuter levels, may disagree with me because, in fact, for those, all you need are commuter stations. Let me show you those real quick, just for completeness. In the station section, you can see the color city stations. And these are the commuter stations. So they produce commuters and they receive commuters of certain colors. So in a level with commuters, all you need is these stations. You don't have to have any other type of station. You don't have to have a city, and you don't have to have a production facility. But you can always mix and match. So like, for example, in this map here, we could add commuters if we wanted to make things a little more complicated. For me personally, I don't use commuters in my levels very often, although they can add a bit of interest. There are some map makers that make levels that are purely commuter levels. But that's not what I'll be covering in this tutorial. I want to focus this time on factory types and different methods of production that might make for a complicated map of different products. So now that we have some of the basics, let's make a full-fledged map with multiple stations, multiple quests, and multiple factories. Plus, we'll add a bit of terrain and decoration elements so you can see how it all comes together. So the first question you might ask yourself is, how do I come up with an idea for a level? Maybe you've already done this part and you actually have an idea that you just want to figure out how to put onto a map. But if you don't have an idea in mind, there are two basic places to start. The first would be to think about what type of production chain you might want to have. Is there something you want to do with breaking down products into smaller products? Or maybe a DLC has released a new type of product that you like to incorporate into a map. Maybe you want to play around with some of the more advanced stations like the hyperloops or the inhibitor. For my maps, I like to come up with at least one anchor for my levels. Some sort of idea that acts as the main theme and holds the level together to make it a more interesting map and can keep me focused on the design. The second place you can start when creating a new level is thinking about the terrain. Do you want to have a bunch of hills? Do you want to have bridges and tunnels? Do you want to have water elements in your map? Of course, your map can be totally flat, but it makes for a more interesting challenge and visual interest if you change around the terrain a bit. For the map I'd like to make for this tutorial, I'm going to use a bit of both techniques. So for the first idea, I've been thinking about using ramen in a level, so I'd like to put together a ramen soup out of different ingredients. For the second idea, I was thinking it would be good to show you some water elements. So having a little waterfall and maybe a river with a large pool in it would make for some visual interest and show you the techniques for using water. So with those ideas, let's get started. The first thing you'll want to do is notice these two icons towards the top. These are your terrain icons. The very first one allows you to move the terrain up and down. The second one allows you to set the terrain at a specific height if you want more exactness. Now, of course, you could start by just putting a bunch of factories down and setting up your cities, but if you're going to make terrain changes, I'd recommend doing those first. You could technically make terrain changes after you've put a bunch of factories down on the map, but I find it's a little easier to try to organize things if you know what the terrain is going to look like first. Before I get started on creating terrain, I should note you can do all this on paper first if that is how you like to design. It's pretty easy to move things around in this level editor, but of course you should pick the technique that works best for you when creating your maps. And I find it's easier to start with the gradual tool first, and then we can move on to precise measurements later. In the case of this tool, there is a circle shape and a square shape. It just changes what type of terrain you're making when you click on the map. And you can change the sizes of the shapes that you put down depending on what you're trying to do. If you have a bunch of terrain that you'd like to get rid of, you can always move to the precision tool, which lets you target everything at 0 or some other height. And then you can choose a really big square, for example, and by clicking that, it sets everything in that region back to 0, clearing away your terrain. It's a good technique in case you make mistakes. For the pond, I'd like to make a circle shape. And although 8 might be a nice size for a pond, we'll start with a smaller tool so that we can make gradual slopes inside the pond. Whenever you're going down to make a depression instead of a hill, you have to hold the shift key when you do left click. So that way the terrain moves down like so. And then we can kind of expand it, make it gradually deeper in the middle, make a nice little pond. All right, does that seem like the right position for the pond? The idea would be we might have a river over here to the left. We might have the waterfall coming down with some factories up here in the top, maybe a slope. So it feels about right. We're probably going to want to flatten out this top right edge a bit. If we go down to the precision tool, we can make it flatter here on the edge, so it acts as where the waterfall will be coming down. To make the slope up, you would also do this terrain again, and we can make a smaller size, maybe 5. And we're going to be coming up here to the top of the plateau. Maybe there'll be a slope down here as well that comes down to these factories. And then this will all be higher. So when you're picking heights for your levels, the basic rule is if you do one level change, then you can have the train go up the slope. So you notice here, I've only made a change of 1 height, and the train tracks can go up this hill. Whereas if I have anything bigger than 1, so say if I go 2, then the train track can't go up there. Although there are sneaky tricks you can use in the editor for that. In general, you can't go up more than 1 level at a time in train value 2. So if you're making a big change, it'd be something more like in the neighborhood of 4 or 5. So a lot of times I like to set the next level of my map at level 5. So let's do that now. Set it to 5. Let's make it a big square so we can kind of do it all at once. And start here at the edge of the pond. So now we've got an immediate rise there that will start to come gradually down. Oops, we can always undo. Like that. See the little blue dots? They kind of show you the borders of your change that you're about to make. So you can line up the blue dots with the train you already have on there so it lines up. You can go along the entire length of your map. And notice now I'm going outside of the blue rectangles. So this is off screen, off of the viewing area that most people won't be seeing unless they do windowed mode. So here I can flatten out everything at the top to make a little upper plateau that reaches outside the screen. All right, and if you're a perfectionist, you can go and clean out the edges later, but main thing is you're worried about the part that's inside the blue rectangles or whatever these shapes are. All right, so now we've got a place for a pool. We've got a place for a waterfall. We don't really have a river up here though. So now we're probably going to want to use another exact measurement. So when I make rivers, I tend to make them 2 or 3 deep. So if we are starting at 5, we can go down to 3, and we could make it a square so that it has parallel riverbanks. That way you can make bridges a little easier. And you just pop a little river in here, make it whatever shape you want, like that, all right? And that way you'll be able to have a factory on the left and the right, and then the slope coming down. Now the slope doesn't match exactly yet, but we can fix that later. We're just kind of getting an idea of the terrain right now for our map. The river coming off from here, we can do the same thing. 4 seems to be about right, but the target level needs to be down again. So we can do -3 maybe. Make it go off the map. All right, so now we've got a basis for a river. We've got a pond. We've got a plateau. We've got some hills leading up to the plateau. Now we can push run to kind of see what it looks like on the whole screen. And we can see here, it's going to be a little tight if we want any factories on the south side of this river. So we might want to move them up, which is not too hard. We're going to just choose the square again, choose size 4, choose -2, 3, and maybe move this up a bit like this. And to make it narrower, we set the rest of it to be 0. So we come along here, tidy up the edges, like so. Still feel like it's going to be a little tight over here, something like this maybe. And then that means we want another little bit to go down so we can kind of see the flow of the river like that. All right, so not too bad. Maybe still a little bit over here on the bottom that needs to be raised. So we'll do the square again, do a 4 again, and yeah, something like that. Lovely. All right, check it out. Looks like that. Now the main thing is you have bridges that you can build because you did not tell the editor not to allow bridges, and you can see where the bridges will work. And you notice we've got one here and one here that are probably going to be useful. These are going to be less useful because you have to start way over on the left to get to them, but we might allow this many bridges. We'll see what it looks like as we go along. The top level, that might be a bit too many bridges. Some people just leave them all in there. I like to move the terrain around a little bit so it doesn't have as many bridges available. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, so what's missing here is the water. We can't really see what we've done here until we put water in. That water has its own little section, object placement menu, that little house. So way down here, the category of water will be in W. You got some boats, you got some waves, you got some other stuff, docks and lighthouses, etc. And then way at the bottom, there's your water. It doesn't show up very well in the graphics, so you've got L for large, M for medium, S for small, XS for extra small. We'll try large first because I think this pond is pretty big. And you can see it puts it down here, but we can always raise the water. So that's what this little raising element is good for. And it looks like it covers it, right? It's just wide enough to come out. So then you can kind of decide, all right, how high do I want it to look like? Do I want it to look like it's like really close and overflowing? Do I want to give it some bank so that people are there can sit and fish or whatever? So pick the height that looks right for you. And then instead of placing another one down and trying to figure out the height to make it match, just do a hover over this little circle that we talked about when we move things. But if we hold the control button down when we move, it makes a copy. So it doesn't just move it, it makes a copy while it's moving. All right, so the problem is that we've got a pond that's got a depth that's different than our river. And so it's not going to exactly match up. So what we can do instead is delete the river and set the bottom of the pond to be this -3 that we picked for the river. And just make a little circle in here like that, because that's going to be kind of the anchor point. There might be some other weird stuff going on down here. That's fine. But the place where we want the water is going to have the height to be the same as the river. That way, when we put the water down and raise it up to the level we want, when we copy it, it'll be the same height. So that was a good demonstration of how it can go wrong and how to fix it. And you can see these match up because of the same height. You'll be able to see seamless water. Sometimes it's hard to make this stuff perfectly seamless. So you kind of want to make a look and make sure you're overlapping your water and it's the same height so that it all matches up. Want to do the river? We can do the same thing. Do a copy, drag. This height is different. I think we chose 2 for the top river, but that's okay because it's going to be a different section. It's going to have different requirements. Make a copy by pushing Control and dragging. I dragged off the map area back over here. Things don't actually work very well, so you want to keep it in the side where it's inside the actual terrain that you can edit. All right, so now we've got our river on the top, on the bottom, on our pond, and now we can make our waterfall, which is also in the water section right here. And it's 3 by 1, which is probably not wide enough, but we can do 2 things here. We could either make 2 of them by copying them, and I think that's probably what I'll do. I feel like it needs to be a little bigger. So over here on the properties menu, we haven't looked at this before. So for all your decorative elements, you have the cell location, X and Y, the offset, which is we'll talk about in a bit, rotation and scale. We talked about rotation. That's where you move the object in a circle. So you're spinning it around to rotate it. The scale will change how big it is. So in this case, we need it a little bigger. We'll bump it up to 1.25. We can drag it down, but that changes the scale back. It's kind of a bug. I would call that a bug, but we can fix it pretty easily. We need to move this over this direction. All right, so the problem here is we need to be very precise about where this waterfall is going to be located. So we're going to need to use these offsets. Now, the problem with the offsets is that at some point when the developers were making Train Valley 2, they went a little astray up here with their coordinate naming. So for the X and Y directions of the cell property, they go this direction, these little X and Y's on the left. So the Y goes up here to the northeast, the X goes here to the southeast. And as you increase Y, it goes up and right. As you increase X, it goes down and right. Whereas for the offsets, the X acts the same way, but the Y is now your height. The Y goes up, and the Z is now your northeast direction. So that can be very confusing. So I've started the waterfall again to give you an example of how this works. If I place the waterfall here and I want to move it a little bit to the southwest, I can drag it like that. Now if I want to move it back closer to the wall, normally I would be changing my Y value, right? Because the cell Y value is going southwest northeast, right? It's hard to see because it's also going up the wall. But if I want to move it farther northeast by using my offset, I have to use the Z value. You'll be able to see this later when we do objects that are flat on the ground. But the basic idea is changing our Z value will move it to the northeast. And I think we said we wanted 1.25 for the scale to make it a little bigger and cover up the wall, so that's good. Still a little high, so the height, remember, is now controlled by Y when you're doing the offsets. So that'll bring it down. And that's close, probably a little bit more across the edge, and it's probably too much. And then a little bit more along the Y, Z. Yeah. And then let me see what it looks like when you run it. It's not bad. I mean, purists are going to be able to look in here and see it's not quite right, but if you're just playing the level, it actually looks pretty good. So we can leave it there. If you want to be extra picky and perfectionist, you can play with that some more if you want. Making a copy, changing the scale. I'm going to try to make it match with the X direction. Offset was 0.75 for Z. Oh, but the cell I think was back one. That's a Y direction. We're moving back. See, this is high level math. Good stuff. Looks like we got some weird polygon artifacts in here. I'm pretty sure those are going to go away once we run the thing. Yeah, don't worry about that. All right, that's pretty good, but I think the heights might be different. Well, negative 1.38, negative 1, yeah. So we make this negative 1, that's the height, offset. All right, so perfect, lovely. All right, so now we've got our river, our pond, our waterfall. We've got some banks that we want to put some factories. We've got some banks up at the top. We want to put some more factories. We've got some slopes that we'll have to finish up, and we'll just get rid of all these X, Y, Z coordinate helpers. So at this point, I'd like to show you two cool things on the internet, because remember, the internet is your friend and it has a lot of stuff out there. It's also your enemy, just, to be clear, but it can be helpful. So for example, I mentioned earlier that there's a trick to finding out which productions do what, right? Because it's sometimes hard to know that animal farm means that's cows, and that the cement factory means that's building materials, right? So the names don't always match up. But at the Steam Train Valley 2 community site, on this site you got all your videos, your screenshots, discussions, the workshop, of course, and guides. Now, in the guides area, which is hopefully where I'm going to post this tutorial, I'm going to give a shout out to Yokuyin, who many years ago made the Train Valley 2 fact book. And this thing is very useful, and Yokuyin keeps this updated as the DLCs come out, so it's going to be current. And if you go down to this section for normal products, you can see every product that is in the Train Valley 2 game, listed by price that you get when you deliver it. So there's two things that are helpful about this. One is next to the products is the production site, also known as the factory, where it gets created. So if you're looking for something that you can't quite remember, like where does natural rubber get created? Oh, well, that's in the caoutchouc plantation. And where does, what's something else strange? Steel slabs. That's going to be in the blast furnace. So if you're trying to figure out something that makes steel slabs, you're going to have to know, oh, I got to go to the B section alphabetically to get to the blast furnace. The other part that's interesting is because the price values are listed, it can help you balance out your level. For example, if you're looking for something that's a high price to get your player to raise money quickly, you can use one of these high ticket items. Like this $9,000 category has a lot of different choices. You could make mecha cows, you could go back to the standard airplanes, you could come up with something unusual and do artifacts. So this will give you some ideas for how to balance out your level. If you're trying to make it so the player has to earn money and they don't have a lot of money right away, then you're going to want to stick to products that are down here in the $2,000, $3,000 level. The other way the internet can be your friend is if you want to change the watercolor. You'll notice that in the properties of water, there's this watercolor edit box. And usually the default color is just fine, but if you want to do something unique, you can go over to the internet and you do a little search, say you just want to use the words hex and RGB, and then put whatever color you want to look for, and something's going to pop up. It might be a website with a bunch of palettes, colors. It might just be this AI summary, and it'll give you an idea like, oh wait, this FFD 580, that might be a number I can use to get a light orange. So let's try that out. Going back to the map, if we just type in that pound symbol plus FFD 580, which we just saw, hit enter, and what do you know? We've got light orange color for the water, and you can use the same technique to make whatever color you might like for water elements on your map. I've seen people use green for toxic slime. I've used red-orange myself for lava. I've seen some light blues for Caribbean waters. It just adds a little personal flair to your level if it's something you want to do. We probably just use the regular water for this level because it seems to fit nicely. I just wanted to make sure that you knew about that option. So let's think about what kind of productions we want for our level. We mentioned ramen earlier because it's a new element that was added in the latest DLC, but they didn't add a production factory for ramen when they added ramen as a product. Remember that website that we were looking at earlier? If we go back over there, you can see that you'll be able to determine what products don't have factories because there won't be any factory listed next to them. So pumpkins, cacao, bats, duct tape, and of course the new ramen won't have any factories associated with it. For those, you're going to need a special type of factory. If you look down through the productions, there are a couple of them that you may have seen in levels that allow you to customize what products they produce. They don't have a set product that they produce. So for example, the alchemical lab, what's another one? Of course, the universal factory is pretty popular. You'll see that on a lot of levels. Also, if you look at the harbors, they produce things that are custom. You can put whatever you want in there for the harbors, a Halloween harbor. There's also a warehouse that stores things. You can put anything in there. There's a market where you can buy things, and a store. They call it the store, and that sets things out on a timer. All of these allow you to click up here in the products category and select anything you want it to produce or contain. And so that's very convenient. The two that are particularly useful are the alchemical lab and the universal factory. Both of these have a set of 5 extra properties you can edit and allows you to tell the editor what makes up those products. So for example, if we were doing something like a camera, let's say, that doesn't have its own production facility, we could tell it that it uses workers and maybe some sort of microchip, and maybe some glass, right? I can, oh yeah. Sometimes I like to point out little features, quote unquote, of the editor, and this is one of them. This little line here that scrolls, you can do the scroll wheel on your mouse, but it can be a little slow to get anywhere. So you really want to use this scroll bar, but in order to get it, you've got to select among the 3 pixels of the width. So it can be a bit frustrating. And if you ever get in this situation, I feel your pain. I'm right there with you. But if you can grab it, then you can slide down and get the thing you want. We were just talking about glass, and here's the glass. Let's say it takes polymers for the case, and so we'll select polymers too. And so there, you've got your own facility for creating cameras, and you can do that for the Universal Factory and the Alchemical Lab. These other ones will only contain products, so the warehouse can take whatever you want. The store, you can buy whatever you want, and so on. Just something good to know as we get through the level to try to figure out how to make products. So let's see how this might work. We started with a universal factory, and we wanted to make ramen, right? It's not just the ramen noodle, right? It's the whole bowl of soup, right? So we're going to want workers. Always do workers unless there's some reason not to have them in there. Then we're going to need what? Some kind of broth, maybe? The potions are usually good for that. So we can do a yellow potion, maybe, and then add some meat. So maybe fish, right? And then it'd be nice if we had onions and tofu and stuff like that, but looks like all they're going to give us is something like maybe a potato. We could do potatoes. Um, that's probably fine. Yeah, a little ramen soup. So now we've got a chain started, right? So we know we're going to need fish. We know we're going to need some broth. We know we're going to need potatoes. Well, luckily for us, we can make some more custom factories for the things that we don't have. So if we want to do fish, for example, you know what? Who am I fooling? Of course, we need fish to be on a harbor. So we're going to pick one of these harbors that we like. The difference between the two harbors is the new one requires electricity. We could add that one just to make it interesting. So some things are going to require electricity, some things are not. We'll do fish requiring electricity, and so that'll make the level a little interesting at some point. Maybe put this over here so it looks like it's more on the water. And we need potatoes, but there's actually a potato farm in here that's got some cool plants, so we're already set there. Maybe the potato farm's up here. And the potion, well, okay, the broth, that could be anywhere. That's also going to be custom. Turn it around so that the tracks actually face out. And we'll make this be the yellow potion. And we'll require workers at this point. We might change this later, if we decide we needed some more factories, if the way to balance the level doesn't start looking right, we can make this broth require other ingredients. Like we could even make it a beef broth using workers and cows. So now we've got broth, fish, and potatoes for our soup, okay? Now, that's a simple enough level you could probably get away with just doing that. For a big map like this, though, I like to have 10 to 15 stations, right? There's plenty of room for more stations. You do need some cities for the deliveries. You're going to need an electrical plant, looks like, so you have to decide, do you want to use one of these electrical plants that just have electricity from the get-go, right? So wind turbine, you don't need any workers, no products, you can just have it run. You could use the uranium, which is the nuclear factory. See, you have to remember these names, nuclear power plant, or you just go to the website. You could use a coal power plant, which I think is actually called a coal power plant. Yep. So that's up to you. For example, if you're using coal for something else, if you're making steel slabs or some sort of copper bar, you could use coal as the electrical maker because you already got coal on the map. So it adds a bit of challenge where you have to figure out when to send the coal to electricity, when to send the coal to make the products. For this map, we'll have to make that decision. The thing I'm looking at right now is the books, right? We put the books down at the beginning just as an example. I'm trying to figure out if that would make sense with any of this. Okay, so part of the process when you're designing maps is often to ponder things a bit. So you may not have noticed, but I just took 15 minutes to kind of ponder the different ideas and permutations here. And I figured out a couple things. One is we've got potatoes, so perfect opportunity to use potato power plant, right? I was talking about using coal if we had coal, but we've already got potatoes. So this is a great idea where we can have something that requires potatoes for electricity, but also for the ramen itself. And in fact, it might be interesting to make the ramen factory require electricity, right? So there's a little bit of redundancy with the potatoes, making the potatoes. So that can be kind of amusing and add some of the challenge. The other part of this is the books take electricity. So that adds to our electricity theme. Also, books and ramen, that sounds a little bit like a ramen shop, right? You might sit and eat some ramen, drink some sort of beverage, and read a book. So we could go with that kind of theme. We could have a little cafe in here somewhere, and we could have books and ramen, and we could have one other thing that makes the hot drinks. And hot drinks were added recently, but they don't have a factory, so you'd have to do it yourself. And a lot of times for hot drinks, you can do honey or you can do hot chocolate. That tends to be where I lean. I guess we don't really have coffee beans. There's a hint for the developers, a little suggestion. If we had coffee beans, we'd be great. We could have a little coffee with our Train Valley. And now we need some cacao, which is also going to have to be a universal factory. We'll do makes cacao. We'll just use workers for that. Oh yeah, we don't need these extra electricity plants. We do need the book products, which is paper. And so that's going to be felling is the factory that does the wood. Yep. And then you've got paper mill for paper. Cow chalk factory that also makes glue besides making natural rubber. So glue factory here. All right. Anything we're missing? Oh, you know what? I was pondering some of this again, and I realized we don't have the ramen, which is kind of the whole point, right? And ramen is actually made of wheat, so wheat flour. So I'm thinking we can sacrifice the potion so that we can use the wheat. And that way, oh, that's right, they call it grain. But grain, it could be any kind of grain, and it looks a lot like wheat to me, so I always kind of consider this wheat. If we do that, we still have the potatoes for the electricity. We've got the fish to add some flavor and the wheat for the pasta. We just don't worry about the yellow potion anymore. We can just use the wheat factory, wheat farm. All right. And we'll just assume the broth, they use water and then these great flavors, the potato and the fish are what make the broth. So we're all good. We're still okay. And we've got a lot of different elements here. Let's get a count of what we've got going on here. We've got about 11 factories here, which is pretty good for our count, and we've got a lot of space taken up by the river and the pond, so I don't think 15 might be a bit crowded. So we'll go with that. Let me organize things a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look at how this is. Everything pretty much fits on the map. We need to move the potato farm a little closer. The wood is a little bumped up against the UI here. But this allows trains to go up back through the ramp here to get to the potatoes. We've got this trick where we're going to have to get the potatoes across the water to the electricity. We've got the wheat up here that's going to need to come down to the ramen, and the fish is already close by. The potatoes are going to have to come down. So there's a little bit of interest here. I thought it'd be kind of cute to put something back here behind this rise so that you need to use a tunnel to go through here. The books might be a possibility. The ramen feels a little strange just thematically because why, if we're making ramen and it's kind of like a ramen cafe, why would the ramen be back behind there? But maybe the books are like some specialty shop over here that needs a bunch of supplies to make the books. So I don't know. That's how I think. Some people might have their own ideas. Just something that if it makes sense to you, then it's going to help you figure out your level and figure out how to put all the moving parts together. So let's spend some time maybe reflecting on this a bit and come back to it.
Well, here I am again, and I've rearranged a lot of the factories, as you can see. So let me kind of go over what I did. First of all, you'll see this warning down here about object outside of safe screen area. That's something that I mentioned we want to look for with our levels to make sure they don't go outside the blue rectangle. When we run this, you will be able to see that it's not quite out of the viewing area, so I think it's okay, but sometimes you'll get this just to help you make sure that it's inside the blue area. So one of the first things I did was move the potato farm down here. I like the idea of the potatoes being next to the ramen for some money. And I like the idea of the potatoes having to go a long way to get up to the potato electricity power plant. And I moved these around a little bit so I could get another worker station here and a worker station down here. So I moved the cacao and the hot drink and the glue I moved over here. The reason I was thinking of that was I like the idea of the paper and logs together. So some things are good to keep together, so it's convenient, and the map is not too random. But other things, it's nice to have a little bit of a challenge, so they have to go farther. So for example, with the cow chalk factory up here, the workers can go up this hill to the cow chalk, and then they can go across the stream by building a bridge to get to the glue factory. Then the glue can come down the hill, and if we build a tunnel through here, we can get to the books. Same with the paper and the wood. It's a challenge to get across the river if we make the bridge expensive, or if it's just something they're going to have to buy later once they have money. The other thing I moved was the wheat. It was a little crowded up here. So if we run the level, we can kind of see what the new overall view is. You can see down here the hot drink, first of all, it's still quite visible on the screen, so it's not a problem. It's just a warning because the corner is starting to leak over the edge. Now, what I've done here with the wheat, the grain, is you can only access this by building a bridge across. You can't build tracks to the wheat any other way. And so the idea is we'll have to build a bridge, and they can do that later. We might add a little rock or some kind of pediment here to make it more expensive to build this bridge. I'll show you that later. So I kind of like that. It's kind of cute. So the other thing I like is if you have two bridges, once you get to the wheat this way, you could make a little loop. You could send your wheat down here to the ramen. Or you could decide to come down here if you have other items that are going down the hill with the glue, you've got some kind of assembly line going on. You've got a few options here, but the trick with the grain is interesting because you don't really need the grain until the end and finishing the ramen. You could do that last. So I like the idea that you have to build up some money, maybe buy an expensive bridge here to get to the grain. And I think that's everything. Um, Now we can set some of the numbers and the quest. Now that we've got the idea that we want ramen and books and a hot drink, we can add cities over here. I've made some room here. You may have noticed that the reason I've done that is so that I can put other cities here. And we'll want probably something a little flatter, maybe not so tall. We just want to make sure that it's close enough to the station that it counts when you finish the level. We can make it maybe a bigger city over here. It's a little tight over here. So here's where we use our offset. Remember that Z goes in that direction toward the city, so it's right there in the top. Lovely. Okay. So now for the quest, we're starting out with 5-car trains and we're allowing them to go to 6. So I'm liking the idea of 6, some sort of multiple of 6 for the books and the ramen and the drink. So maybe we'll do 18, and then maybe we'll do the ramen here, and we'll make that 18 too, possibly. We'll kind of check the numbers later to see if they make sense. Not drink, also 18. And now, the reason I made 3 cities is because I want to let people deliver these in whatever order works best for them. The other way you could do this is you could add more quests to the same city. You can run the level, they kind of fold out, right, like that. So you can see the first thing you need to do is the ramen and the books and the hot drink. So there's 2 things. One is with it folding out, it's kind of going off the edge of the screen, which I don't really like. You could move it down a little closer as long as you're close enough to the city. But I still like the idea of having 3 different cities so that they don't have to do it in a certain order. You can just zero out the ones you don't want by hitting 0. All right, so the other piece of this is a lot of times we like to have another quest for earlier in the production timeline. We can just pick some random town here, make a multiple of 5 for hot drinks, say. And so here, that lets them have a choice where they can make the drinks first at the beginning of the game to get a little money. Or they can save it till later if they want to focus on the ramen and books or upgrading their trains to 6s, for example. Now we could adjust the quest in 2 areas. One is you could probably move this down a little bit so that it's closer to the actual city. That just gives you a visual clue as to where you need to deliver it, and it doesn't block the pathway here as much to get to the hot drinks. And then up here, it's a little busy. And one idea I have is you can use cafe element. I was talking about delivering, like having this whole thing be like a ramen cafe or something. And inside the urban section, you'll find cafe and even cafe tables. And so here's kind of an advanced technique you might want to use in your own maps. These 2 are kind of bumped up together, but if you do, if you move this a little closer to this city, right, it's okay. They overlap, and it doesn't look good right at this moment. But if I shrink this down below the ground, look at this. Okay, this is where your brine is going to explode a little bit. That's all right. So now we've got the city underneath the ground, but it still counts. It's still within the same number of tiles from the station, right? And it no longer blocks the city behind it, but that city is closer. So when you run the map, you can see these a little better than you could a minute ago. And now, cafe, where that ramen is, it'll look like it's delivering it to the cafe. We'll want to adjust this a little bit. Probably make it a little bigger so that it's got some visual impact. And then put the chairs outside, maybe add some more than what's already there. All right, delivering ramen to it and get the books and the drinks right there. It's like a whole theme going on. They're still a little tight, but it's not too bad. We can look at that later if we still don't like it. So now the numbers. The numbers are basically all wrong. The actual stations for the workers, we probably want to do the same thing for the other 2 stations. There we go. Now they have some starting workers on a larger size. We can do some math and calculate how much we'll need of each product here and then set the stations to equal that. The only thing we'll have to figure out that's a little extra will be the electricity. Probably going to need to run the fish by itself, 18 fish to get 18 ramen. So if we use potatoes at a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning 1 potato gives you 1 unit of electricity, so then you need 18 electricity to make 18 fish, and then 18 more electricity to make 18 ramen. And at some point you'll be doing the books during all of that. So we could say the 36 potatoes over here at the electricity plant would be enough. So let me show you how to adjust these numbers. So potatoes, we decided we need 18 for ramen, plus the 36, that's 54. I like to do 5 seconds of reduction. This is a little secret of mine. The reason I do this is 10 is a little long. It's actually okay if you're starting the level with the 2-car trains, which is the default. So by default, all the stations and all the factories will create things 10 seconds per unit, and all the trains will start out at 2 cars. But if you're going for faster trains, like 5-car, 6-car trains, 10 seconds is too long to wait for workers and for things to be produced. So 5 seconds has been pretty good for me for pretty much all my levels have 5 seconds for the productions. The station workers, I'll produce those a little faster, probably 3 seconds. We'll see how that works out later as we try and do some test runs on the level. But that's where I like to start. 5 seconds for the factories, 3 seconds for the workers. Potatoes are 54. The ramen is 18. Also 5 seconds. Same for paper. It's going to make 18 books. Do 5 seconds there. Wood, 18. 5 seconds. I'm going to do the rest real quick. Okay, and then don't forget we have 15 extra of the drinks. So 15 plus 18 is 33. We'll need 33 of those. And we'll need 33 of the drinks. From the level. All right, so now we see we've got 18 pretty much everywhere, except for 36 for the power plant and 54 for the potatoes, plus the 33s for the cacao and the hot drink. The worker stations have 18 total. They start out with 6. I don't think that's going to be enough. We'll probably want to set those to 12 maybe, or 15, something to remind them that they're on 5-car trains. Okay. Things are looking pretty good. The only thing I would say right now is this area up at the top that still looks a little crowded. So we could move this potato factory down here, rotate it so that it's facing the station. That will give us some room to move this over, and this over, and this over. And this is underground, but we can move that over. And one thing you can do is when you aren't sure where it is, you can run the level, and these cities will block the tracks. So you can tell where your city is underneath the ground because of the tracks, of the tiles that it's blocking here. So that looks good. It's not actually blocking the pathway out of the station. And the ramen is still maybe a little close. We could put these out a little farther so they don't look so crowded, but maybe tweak this. I know from experience that if I do this at 0.5, it might not connect to the station. So I do a little less than 0.5. Same with this. I think I'm going to need to put it out a little closer so it looks like it's more out in the open. And this cafe, now that we've moved things around, I don't want to move all this here. Oh, there was a scale when we do that. Um, uh, level, make sure we're not blocking anything. That seems fine. And it looks a lot less crowded. The potatoes maybe are still a little close to everything. You can move those back. And now, to be honest, it makes the fish look a little close too. We could put that over here maybe. Yeah, gives us some room. Now, you'll notice that we have a possible balancing problem already because there are so many factories over here and just one station to support it, right? So there's one, two, three, four, five, plus if we're counting the talk station up here, factory, sorry, we got six that's got to support with one station, whereas this station down here only has two factories, maybe three, and this station has three if you count the lead. And so it's like three, three, and six. So that is just a flag where we could add another station over here, or we could just accept this as part of a challenge where the player is going to have to balance the level themselves. They're going to have to send some more workers, either from down here in the south up to the paper and the lawns, maybe the fish. They're going to have to send one over here, maybe take a bridge and do the cow factory over here. So this is just something to think about as you're once you've put the factories and the stations down. How are things looking just visually, logistically, before you playtest the level? It's a lot better to figure out the design before you playtest because playtesting actually takes a bit of time, a lot more time than just moving around things and pondering in your mind about what might work. All right, I think the last thing maybe is we'll move that city back some more. Just feel like it's crowding the visual space. Oh yeah, forgot about that. And in fact, I won't touch anything. I'll just move everything back by one. This way I can use the whole cell value. I don't have to touch the offset. Right? You're just changing the cell value. X goes in that direction. You're good. Run it to make sure you're not blocking your tracks. You didn't do anything weird. That's okay. And then the step I like to do next is to do the play testing before I start adding any other decorations, just to make sure that I don't need to move things around. But first, let's do the terrain. For the terrain and slopes, a good tool is this exact level, because you can pick exactly what height you want. And you can use single tile square sizes so that as you pick a spot where you want the tracks to come down from the top, you can just make it the height of the plateau up here, and you've got a natural beginning to your incline or decline. And as you go along, you can change the height when you need to be lower. So now I can do a level 4 and attach that to this tile so that now the slope starts to go down. And I'll probably want to do something interesting here, like make it go at an angle, right? Not just straight down. So it comes down, loops over here, maybe goes down like this. And as we're going down like this, I can take it down another level to 3. So now we've got a slope coming down around here, then goes over here. You could have another one here and then go like this. And this can be 2, level 2. And then maybe like this. Could do the slope at an angle again, right? And then we're done because we've got the ability to run tracks all the way down. Starting from here, you can go up, 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 voila. So now the only thing is, do we need to fix any of this so they can't do other weird things? I mean, this is okay. If they want to do that, that's fine. But the main thing is, we don't want any shortcuts. And we don't want them to be able to go over behind the mountain to the bookstore along this route. We're blocking this route with the drink factory, and there's no way to get past here because it's the edge of the map. You get over here. Good. There's no way to get over here. Now, is there a tunnel? Yeah, there's a tunnel already from the way we've made this shape. This one's a little weird, so we can change the height of these rocks. So if we go in here, you can make a more precise tool. So instead of a square that's one tile, you can make a square that is 0 tiles, and that's just a solid point. You can see the little blue point, and you can set your height there. So let's say we want to make this a 2. We just pop that in there. And we like the tunnel over here, but we didn't like the one here, so we can set that to be a 1. Maybe bring this down a little bit so that you can't build a tunnel because it's now a triangle shape, right? Now we run the map to look at what we did. Now we just have one tunnel. Now this tunnel doesn't actually work because if we put it here, we would get to the books. So we could push the books back into the hill, or we could move it over to the right. Let's try that first. Move this to the right, see what it looks like. Top one, because it looks like it's starting to get hanging off the edge. We could just make this tunnel shorter, because I like where it's coming out here, but this could be shorter, which means to do that, all you gotta do is set 1 to 0. And it's going to come out here, right where the tunnel's going to come out. I'm going to do make sure, right? Yep. We just have one more. And we run this. And the tunnel is gone, and that's because this is not flat, so it doesn't recognize this as a flat surface that it can join to. It's all good stuff to know. So now if I make, let's say a square, and no, I don't like that. Let's do a point. We'll make sure that they're both the same height, like that. Whoops, I pushed the wrong one. We want this one and this one, right? Now the tunnel should go through. Perfect. Lovely. And if we build it, and that actually looks pretty good. Here, you can go not quite around. Oh, this might be a problem. Because we want them to be able to come up here. Now, you can still do it. Yeesh. It'd be hard, though. Come up like that. Okay, so for this little problem, we're going to have to retrace our steps back up to here, which I think was a 3. And we'll come down like this instead. Terrain can be a little tricky. Sometimes I got to spend a little bit of time on it. I come down here, here, just to take out this path a little farther. And then, so it's sloping down still, right? And then it goes down to 0. And now there's room for the tracks. Let's run it. Now there's room for the tracks. Come up like this. Also, we turn around and head toward the tunnel, which will be here. Now, the other thing interesting for those of you in the advanced level, there's an opportunity for people to do tunnel tricks here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you can just ignore this. But I like to make sure that there's not 2 tiles next to each other so people can't just skip this little loop and do a tunnel trick here. The paper can get across the bridge here and deliver itself to the books through the tunnel. And people can come down to here, here, or here. The glue can come down from the top and go around. We've got a path. Now we'll just do the same for the hill on the other side. Okay, and then I mentioned the bridges over here. I like the idea we could come around behind like this. In fact, I like it so much that I can show you how to build pre-built tracks and bridges. So there's a tool here with a little railroad track symbol, and that allows you to build tracks on your map that are pre-built. So, for example, you could have something on out from your station. It's already there when you run the map. Same goes for bridges or tunnels. If we wanted, we could put this tunnel in here right now. So when you run the map, it's already pre-built. But that's not what we want. We want them to raise money for that. So now that it's on the map with an object, if you select it, you can click the delete key and delete it. With the tracks, the way to undo tracks is you hold the shift key, and instead of placing tracks, it erases tracks. So for the bridge, the other part about this is there's a bunch of different bridge types, which can be kind of cool. Depends on what you want to do. So one bridge type is like that. You switch to bridge 2, go to bridge here, that's like that. Switch to bridge 3, that's like that. So we can pick a bridge that we want for our level and switch to that, and that way all the bridges will look like that. I kind of like this bridge number 5, so we'll build this one here. And the other part about this is I don't want people to be able to delete this bridge to make some money early in the game. I'm just putting it here to let people know they can go across the bridge, and that's one of the routes that I want to use in the game. So there's a custom settings checkbox right here. Check on that. That gives you the opportunity to set a price for deleting it or to disallow deleting it just by unclicking the deletable checkbox. Okay, so apparently I did not remember that you have to set each section of the bridge to be undeletable. I don't know if that's just this bridge type or if I've really forgotten if this is the case. I haven't done a lot of undeletable bridges, to be honest. A lot of times I'll put bridges in there so they can delete them and make money. So in any case, this works if we set all 4 segments to undeletable, then you try to delete it. You can delete the tracks, not delete the bridge. Okay, so that's good. And then, what's this? What is this thing in delete? Oh, the waterfalls. That's not good. So let's make that fixed. I mean, I guess if they want to delete it, they can, but it's kind of bogus. Not delete. How is it that you can make money deleting? I mean, that's just seems kind of funny. Delete waterfalls. All right. Anyway, here we are. We turn on the construction mode. Right now, the only thing you can destroy are these little chairs by the cafe, no bridges, and you can destroy these tiles. And now we want to prevent other bridges over here because it's just kind of messy. And the easy way to do that is to change the terrain, just bump up the terrain a little bit here at these points so that you can't build a complete bridge. And I think we might allow this one. So all we need to do is set the terrain, set it to 0 point, and just changing the point. You can make this one go up a little bit. You got riverbank. You don't have to do it both sides, but I realize it looks a little better here. Almost looks like rocks at the edge of the cliff or the waterfall. And we're not going to allow one here or here. Might as well go back and fix these. Some random things in here to block the bridges. Let's see what it looks like now. Bridges, we've got the ones we want. We've got the one that's already there. We've got the one we need for the grain. We've got this extra one that people want to kind of play with. Maybe going all the way around here they can. And we don't have any bridges over here. So we're all set. We've got these 2 still. We're going to need these. We've got these if people want to play with it. This one probably is not good, but yeah, we should. I'm kind of a perfectionist, and so these 2 points I'm going to tweak a little bit. So for that, I'm going to make a square. Oops, at 0. I'll make one here and here just to even it out a little bit. Looking a little nice here. Oh yeah, and there's one I think I moved here because when I come out, I'm not going to be able to go all the way out Hopefully I sped up some of that video so it's not so long and tedious for you. Run the level, make sure everything looks good. Yeah, that one's kind of interesting. I think I'll keep that one because what happens is people can go around like this. But the hot drinks take a little longer. You really kind of want the hot drinks to come out like this and go up. But this is a choice people can make about where to spend their money. This is all just me thinking about how to make the level functional and have some sort of logic to it, right? And kind of think about what the players are going to want to be trying to do and allowing the things that I think they might want, but preventing the things that might make it too easy. Um, that's basically the idea when I'm thinking about all this. I'm looking back up here at this station, and I really do like how these different books and drinks and ramen look. Sometimes what I like to do when the cities are not right next to the station is do a little test. So voila, I suddenly have a bunch of warehouses that I took down. You can see I've restocked them with hot drink, books, and ramen, and so now I deliver these to this station. It should all work. That's what I'm testing with. Actually, working hot drinks, hot drinks down to 12. Does books, reduce the books down to 12. Does, and the cafe, ramen, do that. All right, so they're all close enough to each other. Something weird just happened. The city got bigger. That's probably not what we want to happen when we deliver to the cafe. So we're going to have to use a different city. Okay, so now I've changed it to a desert city, which should not create skyscrapers when you finish. And if I set on this quick, there, still work. And now we don't have any skyscrapers here. Perfect. All right, that's why we test levels. And that's why we do little tests with these warehouses. Next, we'll go ahead and play test a level, make sure there's not any bugs and something we missed, and then kind of get a feel for the balance and if things seem to flow. I'll check back in when I'm done with that. Okay, so right away I can tell I have way too few workers, so I'll change that. And I have way too much money because I was using money when I was testing out the level earlier, but I want this level to start with fewer funds. Let me fix that real quick. The other thing I like to do here is start a new version. We've got enough down, and I probably should have been doing this earlier, but I didn't want you to forget about saving different versions of the map so that we have a history of what we did and we can go back and fix things or restore things if we need to see even what it looked like before. We can look at the old map and say, oh wait, this is where the potato farm was. Maybe it worked better over there. All right, let me play test this again, and I'll be right back. Okay, this time when I playtested level, I noticed something interesting, that it's very convenient if you can go to the junk channel factory over this bridge like that, but you can't actually get in there. So I'm going to shorten this bridge by one tile so that you can turn around and get to the channel factory. Okay, so I'm here in the middle of playtesting my level, and I thought I'd point out a few things so you can start to think about how to playtest your levels and what to look out for. So, surprisingly, this is really a good level. It actually flows very well. The things that I noticed were up here, if I use this bridge now for the cow chalk, the potatoes also use it. They come up here, right? Like that. And so that's kind of, in my mind, a shortcut because they don't have to build this bridge right away and they can avoid some of this traffic with the logs and drinks if they come back. So I'm thinking I want to block potatoes from coming up here, which you can do that with a little embargo station saying no potatoes. I don't use that station very much, but I've always kind of wanted to put that in one of my levels. So that's an idea I have for that. The other thing is, you notice I've bought 5 trains with the money I've accumulated so far, and I still have 90,000 $100 left over. So this bridge for the grain, I'm thinking that should be around $100,000. So I'm going to put a rock in here that'll cost like 73,000. So it'll make this bridge 100,000. That'll make them have to put off building the bridge until this late in the game, or they'll have to sacrifice one of these trains and just use 4 trains to get some money for this bridge. Also, we could probably think about reducing the max number of trains from 8 maybe down to 6, because already I've got 5. I'm feeling pretty good. I've got the books almost done. The drinks are already done. All I got to do is throw everything into the ramen and keep the electricity humming along. I like that the number of electricity is 36, which is very daunting. It means you've got to get 6 of these 6-car trains up here to fill the electricity. But if you keep things running while the fish are pumping themselves into the ramen, you only need 24 of these. So this is a good trade-off. People can use that strategy if they want. Everything else looks pretty good. I was able to get the 15 coffee and upgrade my trains pretty quickly, so it didn't feel like I was constrained overly much on having just 5-car trains to start with. I'm a little behind on getting the grain started, I think, so that's where I think it's going to be a good trade-off, whether to get that 5th train now or to wait and get that grain started earlier. So that's what I'm thinking right now. I will finish the playtest and do some edits and show you what I've got.
Okay, we're going to quickly make the updates that we wanted to make. First, we'll change the number of trains to be a maximum of 6. Then we can add that potato embargo station we talked about. Embargo station's right here. It's one of the different types of stations that don't actually have workers, they do other things. So this one, you can put it down to restrict things, and you tell it what you don't want to go through. So in this case, we're going to keep potatoes from going through here, but if they want to deliver workers or send the paper over for some reason, they can do anything else that they want, just we don't want the potatoes to have a shortcut over here. So the other way the potatoes could come through is up through this bridge that we allow. So we should make that bridge cost maybe the same amount as the bridges down here. On this embargo station, we'll do a quick run, make sure that the train can't actually sneak through. When you try to prevent things for the players, you have to do a little extra work just to check, make sure you haven't allowed them a loophole and that you haven't broken anything by blocking. So like, for example, we can still reach the natural rubber if we need to, and we can still get out. So all these things still work. But you can't actually get around the embargo station, and you can't get out through here or here. So it looks pretty good. Now to make the bridges more expensive, that's how you add little obstacles. So here's 27,000, that's okay. The 22,000 is the one we want to make equivalent to these. Looks like there's a 30, a 42, and a 32. So if we could make all these the same price, maybe all of them 42, that would be good. There's a section in the models, the objects, called rocks. I like to use rocks when I need an obstacle. Maybe something white that stands out. If you put the rock right here where the bridge will be, and you change the custom settings to make it so it is deletable, but it's going to cost you some money. So 20,000, that'll make this 42 total. 22 for the bridge and 20,000 for the rock. That's 42 total. And if you do the same thing down here with maybe different kinds of rocks, make it look like it's kind of part of the shore.
So we've got our bridges, now 42,000 here, 32, 52, 42. All right, I misremembered which spot was the rock. So we just need to move this rock over here. And then to get to the wheat, we need to bump this up by 73,000. I don't know, maybe make this rock bigger so that it's kind of dramatic. Make it a little bigger. And make it 73,000. So now this bridge is 100,000. Looks cute. All right. The other thing I noticed during playtesting is I finished the level in about 8 minutes, maybe 8.5 minutes, which is fine. It's a perfectly good level. But I was just starting to get in the groove of figuring out how to move things back and forth. So I was thinking I could bump up these quests to 24 just so that people have a little more time to play with the level and the level lasts a little longer. You know, just give them a little more time to get into the flow of things. This is purely personal preference. Your levels can be as long or short as you want. Of course, I'm sure you know there's levels out there that can last an hour or more for people who really like long levels. Sometimes if you just want a little puzzle or a logistics problem, you could make it a really short 5-minute level just to see if they can figure out the challenge of organizing the products. So all this kind of stuff is up to you personally. I like to keep my levels where I can do them when I know the level really well pretty quickly, like 9-10 minutes, and then if I can do them that fast, then I'll set the time for the actual level that I publish to be 15 minutes. So that gives people who are not as familiar with it, not as quick and efficient, thinking of all the different strategies so you can still get your 5 stars. It can be a very subtle decision about how long to make the level. It's just something you get to know as you play the level, and you can also look at the statistics of your levels. I'll show you that later, and you can see if people are completing your levels as quickly as you expected, or if they're taking longer, or if they're actually going faster. So I'll do one more play test to make sure I didn't miss anything, and then once we know that our level is working, we can start adding some color and decorations to the terrain to make this really spruced up. Oh, I just realized I forgot to set all the new sizes for the factories. They need to be 24 now, so let me do that very quickly. Now we can rerun the level. Okay, during that playthrough I noticed 2 things to clean up. The first is the potatoes need to be 72 now because I've added 12. I've got 24 electric for the fish, 24 for the ramen. That's 48 electricity plus the 24 that you need for the actual ramen. So that's 72. The other thing I need to fix is this bookstore. I went to all the trouble to make the tunnel shorter, but I forgot to push the bookstore back to where it fits better. Now we can add some color and decorations to our level. So first thing is we can look at the color palette. This is this little paintbrush symbol over here, and that allows you to change the color of the terrain. So it's this usual pale green is the default. A lot of the levels in Train Valley you'll see are this color, but to make them really visually interesting, you're going to want to make them a different color. So for this is a little river valley, a little hill. I'm thinking maybe some sort of dark green would be good. Let's set the size to be really large, just like we did when we were changing the terrain. That way you can get a whole bunch of it changed at once. It'd be kind of nice to have a tool where you can change the entire color all at once for the entire world. Maybe that's a hint for the developers. But right now what you have to do is just pick the biggest brush and paint it. Now if we do a run, see what it looks like. That could work. That seems fine. And then maybe a little lighter green on the paths up the hills. So if I do something like this, kind of see where to go. Maybe something a little darker around the tunnel area, just to call that out. That should work. We can go and revisit this later. I'll go ahead and fill the rest of this in. Okay, so now that's all filled in. I'm thinking maybe a little dark spots around the rocks for the dock. I'm not necessarily an artist, but I like to add a little bit of color just to make things visually interesting. You can play with it on your own levels and see what you like to do. The main thing is you've got all these choices for colors. There's a 8x8 box here, so 64 different color choices you can use. A lot of people pick white for like peaks on mountains. If you've got a desert area or some sort of dirt road, you can use the red hues. Um, it's really up to you. It's something you can play with. There's nothing wrong with the pale green. It's clear that you didn't actually change anything. You're just using the default colors, and there's a lot of levels out there with that same color. So if you want your level to stand out and look more visually appealing, it's a really easy thing to do, just to change it to just a different color, maybe add a few highlights here and there. Now for the decorations, this can be a bit tricky because you may have been noticing while I've been selecting different categories that there's a lot of categories in here, and some of these have just a few objects, and some of these have pages and pages of objects. So you could get away with not putting anything in there besides your productions, your stations, and your cities. You could be done right now. There's no law that says you have to add other decorative elements, but it can really enhance your map, and you can do it in a way that doesn't actually cause too much pain. So as I start to look for things that I want to add, I may find other things in these categories that can be useful for my map. So what I tend to do is I'll just start looking for things that I might want to add. So if I want, probably not any animals in this one, but if I see some sort of architecture that I might like, a church or some other house that I could add to make the city more interesting, um, I, I can start kind of just going through, and anything that pops out to me as something that I might want to add to my map, I'll just grab it and put it in here. And then at the end, once I've gone through all this, I can decide, oh, well, that actually doesn't fit very well. I can pick and choose from the objects that I've found. And that way, I don't have to go, if I'm looking for something like this, that's got something on water that has stilts, right? So if I were going to have to find that, I don't know where I would even look for that. I mean, it's called Arch Element 18. So rather than try to hunt for things like this, if I just go through every single category real quickly, just kind of give a visual check to see if there's things that I might want to add, I just amass a collection of different objects that might be interesting for my level, and then decide which ones to use once I'm done. So let me go ahead and do that right now. I've finished collecting all my objects from the various categories, and I've got them arrayed here on my map, kind of in the locations that I want to use them. I will go, I guess, starting from this corner and show you what I've collected, but a bunch of various houses that look like they might just fit in with the style of the area. Maybe shrink this down a little bit, right? And then this could be over here too. And then you could have a little neighborhood maybe of houses here. This is just to add some visual interest. Now, the ramen production facility, so here's the trick. For these universal factories, you can leave them just as they are. That is not a problem. But I like to go the extra mile and make special buildings for special shops. So I've got something that makes ramen. We don't have a ramen factory, but I poked around. I found a couple buildings that might work. Unfortunately, the Japanese DLC does not have a ramen shop in here. That is unfortunate, but we can make do. So we just put this underground a little bit. It's going to be covered up by the building. Keep in mind where the track comes out, because we're going to want the trains to go into our building at the same place where the tracks come out. But when you put a building underneath the ground, it still functions just like it does when it's above ground. You just can't see it visually. So it's kind of a nice trick. That's what a lot of map makers do. And I think this needs to be slightly bigger. And I don't like how tall it is. I think what I can do though is make this look like the bottom and just make it a little shorter, right? Perfect. And then if we run this, we can see where the track is coming out here. All right, so I've misjudged this. This needs to be back farther. And that's using the Z offset, if you remember from before. Yeah, I'm going to want to be behind here, and I'm going to want to have at least 3 tiles covered by the building, because that's how long it takes the train to disappear. See where the track comes out. Seems like it'll work. We can test it quickly. It's going to go in there. Gosh, it would be nice if it went through the window, right? So it looks kind of like a door. We could push this up along the hill. That would still work. So let's try making this maybe just a little bigger and definitely farther along the X. So now you can see the track comes out right here, and it's going to go through this little quote-unquote door. I think maybe that'll be centered, just so it looks a little better. People don't notice that it's weird just at a first glance. And then I kind of like the idea of maybe putting a smokestack back here to make it look like there's somebody cooking something in here. Let's see, let's get the rotation fixed. I think it's going to be 180. That looks right. And then we bring it in from the Z. You know, people probably won't even notice these details, but it adds a little personal touch that I like. All right, so we've got a little ramen shop, and we've got the city with the little towns. Oh yeah, I was going to move these pagodas because I'm just kind of playing around here. This doesn't really lead anywhere. I guess we don't need that, but we could still use this little park with a pagoda next to it. Maybe a Japan town, you know, as part of the city. We've got our neighborhood, our potatoes. You need a few of these. So then this is where you do your control and drag to change to copy as you're dragging. And up here on the potato, I just put a little sack of potatoes. It's kind of cute. Could probably get 2 of those. All right, so there's our factory. All right, so here we've got our wheat, and I just hadn't made copies. This is great. This control when you're dragging is very convenient for when you're making a lot of one object, because it just happens so quickly. So that's kind of cool. And then same thing here with the hay bales. We could do a couple of those. Maybe another cow. Right. Okay. So that's that area. I've got some paper rolls over here, lily pads. I found some waves. They're going to make, so the pool here, the pond will be kind of still. In fact, maybe we'll add a few of these. And then the waves will indicate that the river's actually flowing over here. And so we'll put it in the direction of the river. And I'm dragging with the control key again, so I'm making copies because I want a couple of these, right? Maybe just this last one as it goes off the screen, like that. And I guess maybe one more at the top of the waterfall, and this could be a little bigger even. Yeah, like that. It's coming through here underneath the bridges, like that. Okay. What else did I get? Okay, this was an extra house that I don't need. Now for the cacao, I've done this in a few maps already. Keep in mind where the tracks come out. I have like it's like a little tent for the workers who are harvesting the cacao, and it's kind of where the train would go then when it's picking it up for delivery. Now this is going to be, yeah, I got to do everything precise because when you drag it changes the scale. So we'll do this a little farther, and then these plants can just be all around it. And then I like to tilt them at different rotations so that it doesn't look like, see here it looks like a computer kind of did this, right? They're all the same. But if you do enough of them, no one may even notice this. It's little details that I like to keep track of, but maybe that's just the perfectionism in me. You don't have to do this. The main thing is it's very easy to copy things. And so you can make a bunch of trees, you can make a forest, you can make a bunch of grass, bunch of rocks very easily and quickly, and if you don't care about rotating each one, then it's very quick and efficient. It looks like a large volume of items, yeah, so it's an actual lush garden as opposed to just a few things here and there. So now we run that, we can test where this is going to go. See that going in there. It looks like we have a little bit of wiggle room. Now the cafe, I found another cafe. This one's actually got a hot drink on top of it, so it's perfect. All we have to do is bring this down into the ground again and put this over the track. We're going to make it huge, maybe this big. That seems a little big. That. Same thing. Bring it back and see where this is coming out. See, look at that. It's great. Now we still have some of this sticking out over above the ground. I thought maybe it would get hidden, but it did not, so we can keep it the rest of the way. Now, the thing is, when you're moving this down, the icon for the coffee also moves down on the screen, which could mean it goes off the screen. You don't want it to go too far down because then it'll disappear and people won't be able to see it. But right now it looks good. It's right next to the little cup of coffee. You can see it's a cafe. Now we can put our chairs in front, like so. Put our little umbrellas that match the design. These are technically beach umbrellas, but they work for indicating perhaps they go with the chairs. Now we check to make sure it's not blocking anything. Nope, looks like it doesn't block the entrances. That's fine. We might even put some chairs over here because you see that the actual factory is underground here and blocks these tiles. So the tiles that are highlighted with squares, you can see you can draw tracks on, but here you cannot. So it might be good to have some chairs back there just so that it's clear. It's hard to pick them because the cafe blocks them. Just so it's clear that you can't do a train on this area. Perfect. So the forest back here, I found some trees. It's kind of funny that we've got no forest over here where the trees are getting cut, but that's fine. Whatever. We'll just indicate it with some trees and some logs, and then maybe there's some kind of process where they have to do logging up here and bring it down. And now here again, we're going to just copy a bunch of trees, put them in different places so it's clear it's a forest. You could rotate these to make them look different, or you can just leave them like that. I feel like looks pretty good. All right, now I've put some space vehicles back here. So here's one of the things I like to do with my maps. This is, I don't know if anyone actually will ever do this besides me, but I like to do something off the edges of the map so that only people who want to look for little Easter eggs can find them. And I like often to make it something that's either related to the map, and so you're like, oh wait, there's something else related to the map, or something totally incongruous, like why is this back here? This is kind of a mystery, right? So yeah, that's just me. This seems like a pretty big lunar lander compared to this building. I don't think I agree with that. This seems to be smaller. There we go. All right, perfect. See, now we got our little, some kind of scene going on back here. Looks like I forgot to fix the terrain. This is all the 5-level plateau. I didn't get back here before. I can do that now. Speaking of which, this doesn't look very natural back here. So we could lift up just the bottom floor a bit. Like that, to make it look more natural. And notice we've raised this terrain so we can move that back down to the 5. That way it's kind of a gradual slope instead of what we had before. In fact, we could do that here too to look more natural. This stuff is off the screen, so I don't care so much about it. Okay, lovely. So we've got our forest. If we run it, we can see it looks like. You can kind of see the trees up there. You can see there's a path. You can take this, you can do a little secret path back here if you want, try to get to this other bridge, and drive through these fields and destroy everything, I guess, if you want. And we release the pause button, we can see the waves moving. So this level looks beautiful, and it's also something we can publish, but let me do 2 last things. The first is my secret tracks. I like to put 2 secret tracks down somewhere, and on this level I was thinking there's this narrow strip of water back here. What if I built tracks on the surface of the river down below on the bed? If you draw tracks here, I gotta select the tracks and then just draw them in here. You can see the wire for the track. I'm just doing 2 of them here. And now they're underwater. So if I run the level and turn on track deletion, you can see they're in here. Make a little extra money. All right. And that way, only people that have watched this video will know they're even there. I mean, if someone's very diligent, of course, they'll find them. But you'd have to be pretty diligent to search all the water. The other thing I like to put in sometimes, I forget it a lot, but I have one of my children is an artist, and they're always telling me I need to use more flares because it makes it really look cool. So I feel like I don't know what I'm doing when I use flares, but they can be pretty cool. Make them small and subtle. It adds a little color. Maybe some brown, is that clay? Down here? Sure, like the coffee shop is lit up. If you shrink it down a little bit, it gets a little dimmer. Peach. Yeah, it makes the potatoes kind of glow. it's up to you how you use your flares. I tend to not know what I'm doing with them unless it's something that's very obvious, like I want to change the tint of an area of terrain to be a little darker, a little brighter. I just used a little flare trick in my Solstice Summit map. So if you play that one, you'll notice at the end, the little lonely cabin at the top of the mountain lights up with a flare to kind of represent things getting brighter at the end. So that's just one more technique at your disposal if you want to add visual interest and make your maps really stand out. Okay, so now we'll do a couple more playtests, and then I'll show you how to publish this map onto the Steam Workshop. Okay, so the playtesting worked fine. Level seems to be just a great combination of quests and terrain and management. The fastest time I was able to do was 9:06, so I could probably do a little faster if I focused on it and maybe break 9 minutes. So I'm thinking maybe something like 13 or 13 and a half. Let's see, so we can change the times here for our 5-star times. If we do 13 and a half minutes, that turns out to be 810 seconds. You got to use a calculator sometimes for this stuff. And maybe we can add 6 minutes for each star. So 1330, we'll just add 360. So 1170 and 1530. The no crashing and no wrong deliveries, that seems to work just fine. You could make it more interesting to have a certain number of bridges, or you could do something with the number of tiles, the number of tracks you have to use, but this is perfectly fine, and people come to expect certain goals, and so they'll be used to this goal. The funds I limited down a little bit just to make that so they can't do 3 tracks at once at the beginning, maybe make that a little trickier. So when you're ready to publish your level, there's a big old publish button. In fact, it's there all the time, so you can accidentally publish things, which I think a lot of new players, well, not a lot, but I've seen a few maps out there where someone's just testing what this button does, and so you just get a bunch of kind of garbage or level that doesn't do anything. So we do want to save it with an official name. We'll call this Ramen Cafe, why not, right? And save that. And now that we've got the name, we can publish it. And if we keep that same name in our level editor and we make any changes to this map in the future, we can publish again and do an update. All right, so for the description, you can put whatever you want here. You know, but I like to do a little more detail. That's just me, and this window is kind of tiny and you run out of space. So actually what I do is I make a little description earlier and then just copy this description. Paste it right into this window. And sometimes the carriage returns will make it look not quite right, so we go through and fix the carriage returns. Then we just do publish. You see all these little characters across the screen, little icons for little products. Sometimes it takes a while. So once you've published your map, you might want to go out to the workshop to see when it shows up. And this is just the Train Valley 2 Steam page, the community page. If you go to the workshop section, you can see most popular workshop maps that are out there. You click on most recent, and then you can check and refresh to see if your map is showing up. And once I see my map, I will come back and show you what that looks like. I just refreshed the screen and I see our new map, the Ramen Cafe by Pluto. Looks good. And we can check our description by going to the map. It shows the description. We can add comments because we're the author. And we can look at our change notes. So I did notice something when I was waiting. I had to bump the ramen factory back a little bit because the track was not highlighting. You could still kind of connect it going direct, but you couldn't connect it sideways because it wasn't highlighted correctly. So I fixed that. And so now, because it's the same name, when I click publish,
it'll have an update button instead of a publish button. The description is still the same. All I have to do is click update, and that fix will be in there on my map. And I did a refresh, and I see now I have down here 2 change notes. So if I want to be really nice and clear to people who look at these pages, I can edit the description for each one. And that way people know what each version is about. Go back to the item, edit the other change note. All right. Now if you go back to the item, people can see what changed with your map. That way they know what happened. And if you have a major change, like you change the amount of time it takes for the level after a month, maybe it's been out there for a month and you decide, oh wait, no one's being able to complete my level, I need to make the times bigger. You can do this edit here on this page when you do the update, and that way players will see, oh wait, that's why I can do this now, because the author came in and made an update. I don't think a lot of people actually know about this feature, so I wanted to make sure you were aware, and in case you want to do any updates to your maps and have comments for your viewers. Okay, the one thing I mentioned that I wanted to also show you was looking at your workshop statistics. So if you sort by new, you can also search by author to find just yours in here. This is Train Valley 2 programming. This is them calculating statistics for the maps that get posted to the workshop. So it's not something that Steam's keeping track of. It's a really nice thing that the developers put in so they can see statistics on the maps. And if you click on your statistic button, you can see how fast people are doing your map. And the way it looks like right now, it's been maybe 24 or 36 hours since we posted the map. We wanted it to be 13 minutes and 30 seconds. It's 13:12. Looks like the majority of people are doing it in 13:12 or less, so their number looks fine. However, I did notice that a few objects in the custom factories we made for the ramen and the cacao were deletable, and I didn't want players to be able to delete the custom factories, so I went in and changed those to be not deletable, and I'll show you an update to the map since we didn't get to see the update screen last time. So here we are in the level editor. We've got the publish button, and you'll notice when you click on that button, because the title is the same, that button now says update instead of publish. The description we will keep the same. The only thing I changed was made some of the custom factory objects undeletable. So if we update this, it'll go to the workshop. And that is what the update screen looks like. Now you know. Okay, so that's the end of my map making guide. This is the first time I've published a video guide, so I hope it worked out and I hope it's useful to people. Thank you for paying attention and listening to my ramblings. I like to think that I have some ideas that I can share with the community, and so I wanted to be able to do that. I'll see you all out there on the workshop and on the channel. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments on the guide page, or you can even ping me at the Discord channel. I'll be out there driving some trains and solving puzzles. Take care.